Hey everybody, and welcome. I have a request to make something, and that request actually comes from the Valheim official Discord. Comes from Azrael. Shout out to him. He's putting in a lot of good suggestions, as you can tell by the likes here. I chose that I'm just going to make this to show you guys how to actually make this. So they just want a hammer that has more than 300 durability, and it becomes a pain constantly having to repair this. So, more or less, this tutorial is going to show you how to effectively use my template, use the item manager, get things set up, and actually clone a hammer and show you how actually in code, so you don't have to do all these references, to be able to fix this up, make this look nice and pretty. So this video is going to be long, possibly multi-part. So let's get started. So we know the request. It's basically more hammers, higher durability. We're going to try and make that scale somewhat similar to vanilla Valheim. So I'm going to open up Writer, and in Writer here, I've got my templates pre-installed. I've actually already launched this at least once. So we're going to say new solution here. Once you install my templates, you should have this. You should never use the template directly. Always install it and make one based off of it. So we're going to call this hammers. Actually, we're going to call this more hammers like I just had. And then we're going to hit create here. So by default, when you download my templates and get this set up, it comes with a README. It tells you how to actually use the template. Comes with example code, but technically you can skip that. This is just for reference if you delete the code, because if you go into plugin CS right here, of course, I changed this. I always make that capital. That's a mistake I've made in my templates. But if you scroll through here, you'll see that there's code for you. This is the same thing that's in the README, so always use the README as reference, but anything that you don't need, delete. So things that reference, let's say, an asset bundle that we clearly don't have, we haven't made, prefabs, etc., registering anything, again, from an asset bundle that we don't have. This is all basically example code, so we're going to erase that. We're going to erase anything related to items, item manager, and in this case, all the way to conversion. So basically, you want to go and only have like server config locked. Make sure this is using server sync for you. Server sync is here. If you right click on properties, it says copy always. Make sure that is set if you're doing this manually. And of course, make sure that you have it as a reference. So if you're in Visual Studio, this will probably be called references, and you'll have it here. Same thing, same rules apply. Just make sure to set the properties on the DLL. And then IL repack is already set up for you. So I typically do the item manager as a CS file, which is basically just allowing me to copy and paste and use the code, update, change, fix, whatever I need to do, right? If you choose to use the DLL, which can also be found in the libs here, but you have to hit show in Explorer in my case, and jump into libs, and you'll have it. So in order to get that, you would have to say like right click, add existing item, it would open that, and then you can click reference, make sure it's a dependency, etc. I choose not to use that just because the class makes it a little bit easier to change things to public if I need to access certain things to make my life easier. So this to me is just easier overall. That is the benefit of these managers. So for now, we're going to pretty much be outside of code. We're going to jump into Unity, but this project is already set up and ready for me. And whenever we create our asset bundle in Unity, we're going to drop it directly in this folder, and I'll show you what to do at that point. So set this up, make sure, notice that it changed everything for me. It's version 1. Always make sure to change the author if you're using my templates. This author field is used in the assembly info and properties, so it automatically sets all of this, and of course it sets your mod version, so when you hover the DLL in your file explorer, it'll actually tell you the correct version, so you don't have to go and look at it. It comes pre-set up with a version handshake. All that means is that it's going to, if it's installed on the server, it's going to try and version handshake with itself. And if the client doesn't have it, but it is on the server, it'll kick them. If they do have it, but it's a wrong version, it'll kick them. If they do have it and it's the exact same version as what's on the server, it'll let them in, etc. You can optionally choose to delete this if you don't want that, or if it's a client-side only mod. If it is a client-side only mod, I do recommend that you remove anything that is related to server sync, because that will be prone to break if Valheim devs themselves choose to make network updates. So I'm not going to be really in code for the most part, at least not yet, not until we've done everything we need to do in Unity. But this is the item manager mod template. Notice by this, we get the item manager here, because we are going to be creating hammers. Hammers are technically item drops or things with item drop components, and I'll show you what that means here in a minute. So I'm going to close this out actually, and I'm going to go into my Unity hub. You can follow my videos, go to the Valheim Unity project guide out on GitHub, and figure out how to actually rip the game. I've got a ton of these. If you have any questions, jump in the Discords. But I'm going to click on this one. This is my most recent rip that I've made. It works just fine. Don't have any issues with it, etc. So this will take a minute to load. So I'm just going to pause here and we'll come right back. All right, so my Unity project is loaded. We've got all of the stuff that I've been working on and messing around with. Typically, I put it in a folder called like export items or things that I'm going to export into asset bundles, etc. So I've got a few things in here already. Typically, I slowly import stuff from my other Unity projects into the latest one. As you can tell, I've got a few things in here like my admin tool and etc. So I'm just going to create a new folder and I'm just going to call this like MoreHammers. So MoreHammers, and we're going to go in here. So in a default rip, things that I've said to you in the past is it's highly risky to do things like this, so use it if you wish. But basically, I have all of the Valheim prefabs inside of this particular rip of the game. Okay, so you don't necessarily have that. If you followed my steps, typically you would clone the project that has all those prefabs and you'd wipe them out. That way your project loads a little bit faster. For the sake of argument, I am going to set this up, pretend that I've already imported the hammer and I've got the references, so on and so forth, and we're just going to use this project. I find it easier. It is high risk, high reward, so if you do it this way, make sure that you're backing it up. So the high reward, of course, is that you can have easy references to vanilla prefabs. So we're just going to go into hammer and we'll see all of the different hammers that they have, the icons, the textures, so on. Okay, so the big thing is you'll notice that this is a hammer piece table and a hammer. Both of these are prefabs. So the hammer piece table by default is going to hold every single buildable piece in the game or things that have a piece component. The hammer here is going to be the actual prefab that we're going to want to mess with, and I'll show you kind of how this is set up and what these things mean. So the Valheim scripts, again, as I mentioned, item manager is going to use things that have item drop scripts. So it's got the icon here, it's got the localized key name that they have. So if you're using the localization, make sure that you make a key and localize that. So right here where it says build pieces, it's actually referencing the hammer build piece table. And it's down here, so that's what this is. So if we actually click that, it'll highlight it for us, and you can open this up. So if we open this up, you'll notice it has a piece table component, or a piece table script in this case. It's got 170 total pieces in here. It's using categories, and every single one of these are references to game objects that are found in this folder. So, and by the folder, I mean the assets, game objects, etc. That is subject to change depending on the asset version or asset ripper version that you're using. So it won't necessarily be game objects. It could be prefab instance. It could be prefabs, whatever. Asset ripper tends to change that. They also tend to change away from using a scripts folder to sometimes a plugins folder to sometimes a mono behavior folder. So just do that to figure out where your scripts are going to go, and just kind of figure things out. As long as you know where the general structure of things are, you'll be fine. So this is kind of our bread and potatoes, but we're not going to duplicate this. We don't want this in Unity. We're going to do this part in code here, okay? So we're going to create some new hammers. We're going to change up the textures and get that rolling. So I'm going to type in hammer again here, and I'm going to grab the actual prefab of the hammer here. And we're going to duplicate this. So I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate, and you'll notice that I have hammer 1. I'll go over here and I'll drag this to my MoreHammers folder. And if we open up MoreHammers, obviously we have our new hammer. So make sure to double click it, make sure it says hammer 1 here, here, and here. Don't make your tokenized names the same thing as vanilla. Make sure it's unique to your mod. Potentially even put like your prefix of your name or something in there to make it unique. That way it doesn't clash with any other mods that might be doing something similar. So the benefit of the item manager is that this is going to be super fast. We don't have to do anything crazy. The main thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to find these textures here that actually make the hammer look brown and set this up. You can scroll through the components to take a look at it. Do not delete the attach game layer. This is required by Valheim. They physically search for that for items in order to use and attach the mesh renderer to your character's hand. So, custom creature, this is a Valheim specific shader. This will not work if you bring it in game, so make sure that you replace that in code, and I'll show you how to potentially replace that. So we're going to go here. We're going to go into our item drop, and I'm going to go ahead and start configuring this. So they said the default durability needs to be higher than 300. So I'm going to scroll through this. I'm going to find durability. I don't exactly know where that is, so you'll find it as soon as I find it. We'll scroll through here. And max durability. So max durability is, yes, it's going to use durability. If it breaks, it's not going to actually break it. It's not going to destroy the object. So we do want that. We don't want that to destroy our hammer. So max durability by default is 100. Durability per level here is 100. So for each level that we upgrade this hammer, we're going to get an additional 100 durability. So maximum this should be either 300 or 400 like he mentioned. So if we can get it to level 4, obviously it'll be 400, so on and so forth. So we're going to change this. We're just going to say for a new iron version or a bronze one in this case, we're going to increase it incrementally. So I'm going to say this is 150, and then for each new level, we're going to increase it 150. So that's going to be good for us. And we are going to go in here. We're going to save that change. And right here where it says item hammer, we're going to call this like a bronze hammer. So bronze and underscore hammer. But in this bronze area right here, I'm just going to put a prefix of like Azu. That way it's specific to me. So bronze Azu hammer, right? It's specific to me, specific to my mods. It's going to be unique because not many other people are going to do that. So usually the way Valheim does it is they always add an underscore description for the description. So easy to remember. Max quality, so this is 3, so he's right about 300. We're going to change this to max quality to be 4. That way you can make it an extra level, right? So the weight, we're going to increase the weight by 1 just to kind of balance out the new durability. And this build pieces here, we're actually going to delete this. So we don't want this reference. We're going to do that in code. So scroll through here. There's not really anything else that you need. You might be able to scroll and find like stamina usage. So you might say that it uses slightly more stamina because it has more durability, or it's a new bronze thing. So I'm not going to super worry about that. I'm just going to walk through the tutorial and show you kind of how you can set this up in code. So we're going to save this. I'm going to call this, I'm going to double click here and say bronze hammer and hit enter and save. It's going to ask me to rename the file. I'm hitting Control S, by the way, to save that. If you guys aren't familiar with default Windows save commands. So this item particle here, mine is set to standard. Yours probably will not be. So this is just a simple fix for this. I'm choosing not to replace this in code. You can set up the renderer, so on and so forth this way. This is going to point to the material. This is going to point to the particle itself, like the PNG and all that. So fix those, make sure that they look fine in game and you're not getting any errors. We may or may not get some errors just because I'm going to try and make this tutorial relatively fast. But we're going to scroll through here. We have a bronze hammer. I called this a bronze hammer. I'm going to create one for this video. Make it short, sweet, simple, and then from there, I'm pretty sure you can figure out how to make additional. So by default, hammers use categories, and those categories are going to be on the hammer piece table here. It says use categories with all the references of pieces. So categories are going to be what the actual hammer is placed in, where the item is or the build piece is. So by default, that's like misc, building, furniture, blah blah. So anything that is a build piece will be able to determine what category is. So if we go into like fire pit here and we double click this and we go to the piece component, you'll notice that the category is misc, right? So these are the categories. So you're not worrying about that on the physical item. Notice that is applied to the physical pieces that come with Valheim, buildable pieces. So like fire pit, fermenter, so on. So we're not worried about that. The only thing that we need to worry about is the physical textures. So the textures are going to be found on the, in this case, hammer layer is where you're going to find your mesh renderer. And we're going to click this. So we're going to click here. You'll notice that you have weapons metal and this. So they're all three, luckily, side by side. So I'm going to duplicate one of these. And I'm going to drag that to MoreHammers. Duplicate the next one. And drag that again to MoreHammers. So the reason I'm doing this one by one is because in my experience, if you duplicate multiple at the same time, you have a hard time keeping track of which one was the original. So that's my recommendation. Go with it if you wish. Don't if you don't, so on and so forth. So we are going to click here again. This is called weapons 1 material. So I'm going to type in weapons 1. We're going to get this material here, and I'm going to duplicate that material as well. Which doesn't look like it did it, so I'm going to duplicate it again. It says weapons 3 material, but I'm not getting it, so we're going to type in weapons 2. There it is. All right, so I'm going to drag this into MoreHammers, make sure it's in that folder. And if we go back to the MoreHammers folder, I've got all my textures, I've got all my materials. But if you notice on this material, if I click here, it's referencing the original weapons. I do not want that. I do not want that. Okay. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to double click on this again. And then so the duplicated textures that I have, I'm going to make sure that those are here. So you're going to, instead of clicking on it, you'll notice it'll change the side. Or actually just click, hold, and drag and drop it here. Click, hold, drag, drop it here. Click, hold, drag, drop it here. All right. So now these, if I click on it, it's going to reference the new ones. Okay. So custom creature, this we can fix in code. We can use the material replacer from the piece manager. That is a copy and paste, or you can switch this to standard and it'll just kind of look how it looks, right? It's not going to have all these extra things and metallic. It's not going to look quite right if you make metal textures on this. You might have to create your own shader for that. So we're going to edit this either in Photoshop, in GIMP, whatever you want to do. Some textures are easier to edit like that, others aren't. So if you have more experience than me, you can potentially take this into Blender or potentially take this into other places. Before we do that though, we notice that this says 256 by 256, so does that one, and so does this one. So we're actually going to select all three of these by holding down Control and clicking, and we're going to set these to their original size. Okay, we are going to compress this and move it over, and we're going to make sure that read and write is turned on. This is for mods in general. This makes it to where your asset bundle is going to be smaller. It's not so big. The mod's not so bloaty. You can choose to do a lot of this in code if you wish. This is just if you want to make something simple. So we're going to go here. We're going to edit these three things, mainly this one here and potentially this one to be able to create some kind of metal. All right, so we're going to go open this. I'm going to go where weapons 1 is, and I'm going to say open with Photoshop. So in Photoshop, I'm going to edit specifically the hammer, kind of give it a little bit of color, a little bit of texture. And we can use another texture, something that's bronze, to be able to tell us kind of how this looks, right? Or how this should look. If you notice, the hammer is going to be right about here. This looks like the handle. This looks like the side piece. And we can confirm that by editing it, saving it, but then actually not exporting or doing anything like that. We're just going to draw something on here, and we'll swap this to like red or something, and we'll just put a little line here. We'll save, go back to our Unity, and if we notice, it immediately updated here. And because this bronze hammer is using it as an actual texture, that should have updated, and it did not. And it's because, guess this, I forgot to drag this here. So it's not actually using weapons 2. Now it is. So we have weapons 2 directly on this bronze hammer. We're going to hit save. And you'll notice that if I click here, we've got weapons 1 in this case, which looks like I've edited, or I've accidentally edited the default thing. So, hey, look at that. Messed up. You'll notice that I highlighted one side, but it's highlighting both sides. That means it is going to be mimicked on either side. So if we edit one, it's going to mimic on the other. Okay. So we're going to need to fix the original material because I messed that up. So this is a good thing. We can fix that. We'll go to weapons 1. We'll click here and you'll notice that I have all of these. We have the weapons in. So we're going to do this. We're going to grab the original and we're going to slap that sucker right back on there. That way it's not a big deal. And we have weapons 1, weapons 1. There's 2 weapons 1s. Interesting. But we've got that fixed. And I meant to click more hammers here. So on this hammer, we can go in here and we can undo what we've done. And we need to add some kind of metal material. So metal material comes, like if we look at the bronze, anything bronze, which is what we're trying to mimic, right? So this here, or anything else, like the bronze legs, right? We can look at the textures. We're going to scroll all the way down to this. We have this bronze shader, and we can click here. And you'll notice that metal seems to be just a simple yellowish texture directly overlaid on top of wherever that color would be. So for our metal, we're actually going to give it a see-through texture and we're going to add it. Okay. So for, let's see, go into MoreHammers here and our metal thing here. And we'll make sure that this says that we're going to be using the correct shader or material in this case. So metal 1, you can see that there's kind of a blob here. We're going to open this also, and I'm going to move this to a different screen. Go in here. I'm going to drag this on top. And you'll notice that if we do this and we go here and we'll turn down the opacity, and then you'll be able to see exactly what you can color, right? So we'll go onto this, we'll convert this to a layer, and we'll go to like, I don't know, a bright yellow. We need some kind of metal, we need some bronze, and it looked fairly yellow to me. So we're gonna color the exact same thing on like the ends here. I'm gonna make this a little bit, let's see, a little bit smaller. We'll do like 9 or something. 9 looks like it fits, but I'll go a little bit lower to like a 7. And once you're done here, click away, scroll in. And this particular thing here, I'm just going to kind of draw on our metal layer. Doesn't have to be perfect, but it does kind of have to be a little bit of a circle, do your thing here. You can also make the handle fully metallic. So that's what I'm going to do. And this is just a rough guesstimate. If you're better at Photoshop than me, obviously you could probably do this in a different fashion, maybe a little bit faster, by using the magic wand tool and selecting it right, and just doing like a color fill, so on. So I'm just going to save this. I want to see what it looks like. We'll save this in the MoreHammers folder. This is the full PSD itself. We'll say OK, and we'll go back. And if you notice, we have a new texture here. This is weapons 1 or weapons 2. And that is because this is right there, right? So you can export this. We will go here, jack this up, and we will save that. So, and that's because this is 2 separate textures now. So we can undo this, file, then export as PNG, and we can paste in this here and say weapons 1. We're going to want to replace the metal, so we're going to click the metal and say save. But I'm actually going to make this as like bronze. And as you can tell, I'm obviously fairly sporadic when I make mods. So go here. This is still the original, and we're going to want the one that's PNG, which it looks like it's this one. We're going to drop it right there. So as you can see, we already kind of have a little bit of metalish texture. You can kind of see that, right? And we're going to kind of remove our red that we've added here and export that. So we're going to save this file. Again, export, quick export as PNG. And I'm going to directly replace that to get rid of my red that I've added. And go back in. So we're going to get this. This doesn't quite look metal-ish. You can turn off gizmos to get a little bit of a better view of kind of what this looks like. Fly around. You could even just use these toggles here, you know, and of course double click on this, rotate it, make sure it looks the way you want it to look. And we want this to be a little bit more metallic, so you can add more smoothness specifically on the metal. If it doesn't look the way you want it to look, of course you can change the colors and make this to where it's a little bit darker metal, a little bit lighter metal, and that this is bronze and so on. So I'm going to pull it a little bit more to the orange. And we can see that that kind of looks, you know, kind of looks bronzish, right? But we want to do something with this, or maybe we do or don't. That's up to you. For me, this is good. This is a bronze hammer. It looks kind of shiny. It's going to come in the game as shiny. I've done my job. Yippee-ki-yay. So, bronze hammer here. You need to know how to bring this into Valheim. If you're using the Valheim Unity project guide, you will have Valheim up here and build asset bundles. If you are not, okay, you will potentially have to get asset bundle browser. So there's different ways to get this. Sometimes it shows up in your package manager. Sometimes it doesn't. That does depend kind of on the Unity version that you're using, right? I've got a ton of assets. Mine's not going to be in my assets. It's actually going to be in Unity registry. If you don't see it here, you actually have to get that from GitHub, okay? And by GitHub, I mean go here and say github.com, and then you can search asset bundle. So asset bundles browser by Unity Technologies. As you can tell, I've already been here once before. So this is kind of the link that you want, GitHub, Unity, Assets, Technologies, etc. We're going to click on this code button, copy that, and you will go here. I'm not going to do it because I already have it, but you will go here and then you'll say add package from Git URL. You'll paste it, you'll click add. This does require you to have Git installed on your machine, so keep that in mind. Now, with Git installed on your machine, Asset Bundle Browser there, you can do this, and I'll show you this particular method. This shows you all of your asset bundles. This will give you an idea of about how big that asset bundle is before compression. Keep that in mind, before compression. It'll show you each one that you have, right? So I've got X-ray tooltip, etc. You'll notice that I don't have one for this bronze hammer. That's because we have to make one, okay? If you're not using the Asset Bundle Browser, this by default is in the standalone folder. So I've got this here. So in mine is the rip Valheim, the date that I actually ripped it. And you'll go into the one that has the date if you're using the Unity project guide. It'll be in Asset Bundles, standalone windows, and here's all your asset bundles using Asset Bundle Browser. If you're not using Asset Bundle Browser, it'll be in a different location. It will actually be in the Assets folder, Asset Bundles, okay? So keep that in mind. Depending on which one you use, depends on the location. You can change that location if you wish via Asset Bundle Browser. Here, you can tell it to export under the build. You can tell it to export to a different spot if you wish. Okay. Force rebuild, only have that on if you feel like your asset bundle didn't actually change. Turn it off by default, and it'll only pick up any new changes. Okay. So this bronze hammer, we want this in an asset bundle that we haven't made yet. So we're going to click on the bronze hammer. You can go here and say new. And if you start typing and nothing happens, keep in mind that's normal. That's a bug. I've mentioned that in a few of my other videos. Click away, click back, click new, click back directly into the box, and you should be able to type like I can here. So I'm going to call this More Hammers. And there's my bundle. So in Asset Bundle Browser, I should be able to see that if it refreshes. And it's not refreshing, so we'll go here, Asset Bundle Browser, and we'll force it. Reload all data. So I forced it, and we can see everything that's going to come in, right? So we've got the mixer, we've got item particles, the spark, all this. Some of this is considered to be bloat. You don't necessarily want to bring this in, especially the entire sprite map, okay? We don't need the sprite map. Luckily, the item manager can do this for us. We can get our own icon. So click back on here. We don't need this, right? We do not need the icon. That is what's actually giving us the sprite map, unless something else on your prefab is referencing the sprite map. That's what you can do. If you need to bring in the sprite map, never compress it. Never, ever, 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 ever compress it, because you'll make every single icon in the game look like garbage. Okay, so we'll save that. And if we say reload all data, that should disappear because the hammer only needs it once. And I could be wrong here, but so the sprite map is this. We can open it and you can see that it's literally every single thing like a shield. And you'll notice the reason why I say don't compress it is because they're already kind of fuzzy, and they're fuzzy for a reason. So don't mess with that. And we'll look at the bronze hammer. I'm going to figure out what else is still referencing that sprite map. It is probably this. You can leave this in. This is a particle. Again, compress that so it's 64 by 64. I recommend compressing it. And again, read and write and hit apply on that. So as you find things and as you make things, make sure you compress them. If they need to be compressed, keep in mind if it suddenly becomes fuzzy in game, uncompress it. You can uncompress or undo what you've done by either hitting Control Z, or if you closed the project by accident and reopened it, or it's a different day, whatever. Just remember kind of that most things come in at 2048. So change it back to 2048, uncheck the compression, but make sure you always leave read and write enabled. So we're going to go here. We have the weapons 2, we have all this. I'm not compressing the sprite map. I'm going to bring it in anyways if I can't find what is still referencing it. It looks like nothing is still referencing it on mine. It could be that it's just, that I've clicked on this one too many times. So I'm going to use this one, this drop down here, to build my asset bundle instead of asset bundle browser. But we can see roughly how big things are, what comes in, and what it looks like. So I'm just going to go straight to the code. I'm going to show you how to bring this in and potentially how to add all of the same prefabs that you can find on the default hammer. And I have some old code of my own that will help us in that fact. So we've got our bundle. We know where it is. We know that it's going to be, and I'm going to close out Photoshop. I no longer need that. We know that this bundle is going to be where my stuff is. So you can right click here and you can say show in Explorer, or, and then of course go out here and click assets, go back in, whatever. Or you can actually scroll on the left hand side here and you'll be able to see it. You'll be able to click on more hammers and then say show in Explorer, and then you're already right on it. It's already selected. Okay. Pull that to a different area, and we're going to open Writer again. And mine still has my MoreHammers project. So we're going to load this MoreHammers project in solution. And here is the code portion. I'm going to pause here for a second, let you guys get caught up. But basically, at this point, you should have your IDE open, ready to go with the template if you've used the template. If not, make sure you've got a similar structure. You followed the BepInEx documentation to be able to create a basic, simple plugin. Use Server Sync. Follow that documentation if you want to use Server Sync. If you're not using Server Sync, make sure that you're binding your configs not in this factor, but you say config.bind instead, like this. But this is a wrapping function that allows us to return a default config and have an additional thing called synchronizing. So now we want to set up our prefab. We need to bring in the item in game. It needs to have something attached, right? So we can go to our README because we deleted some of the example code. We can go to our README and we can see that how to create a basic one. So we'll grab that here. We'll just hit Control C, and I clicked Item Manager here, and I'm just going to paste this. So obviously, Iron Fang is not our asset bundle name. We chose our asset bundle name by this right here. So asset bundle, we called it MoreHammers, right? So in your folder that you have open here, you'll scroll, you'll find MoreHammers. Make sure it's not the manifest and not the meta. And then we will go back to this. And you can just directly drag and drop this into assets and let go. And you'll notice that it'll already be here. If it's not, you can right click, add existing items. You can tell it to right click, of course, and include. You'll have an option to include instead of exclude. We will right click on this, go to properties, and embedded resource. If you're using Visual Studio, it'll be somewhere in the bottom right. It'll be able to tell you to set properties. So if you have any questions, let me know. But this needs to be an embedded resource. We're going to say copy to output directory is do not copy. We don't need it to do that. It needs to be in the assets folder. So the folder name here, you'll notice the folder name is called Iron Fang. This would be if I had, so we're going to just show you an example. If I had a folder like this called Iron Fang and it was internal like this, and I have my bundle here instead of where it's currently located, that's when I would use a different folder name. If not doing that, you can delete it completely. Make sure you delete all the way up to the comma, okay? So I'm going to show you that again. I'm going to delete this, delete the quotes, delete all the way back to the comma. So this right here, I've got mine that tells me kind of what the parameters are, but the first parameter is your asset bundle file name. The second one is your prefab name. If you do not have it populating like this, you can actually hover above item here, and you'll notice that it says it takes a string value of the asset bundle file name, the string value of the prefab name, and then the folder name by default is assets. So we don't have to specify it if it is in the assets folder. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to go to edit, delete, and we have our bundle. It's already embedded. It's a-okay. So what we need to do here is we're going to call this MoreHammers and make sure that that matches. Do not change the name of your asset bundle after the fact. This code looks directly at what the original name was. Recompile it in Unity if you need to change the asset bundle file name. Okay, you can do that by renaming. You can create a whole brand new one and then reassign it to the same prefab. But our prefab name is called Bronze Hammer, so I'm just going to double click that because I'm lazy and copy it and go back. And I'm going to paste my prefab here. And then Writer can do this. I'm not sure if Visual Studio can, but if I hold down Alt and just click and highlight, I can say that that's now Bronze Hammer, and this is now Bronze Hammer. I'm going to make that a lowercase b, and then I'm going to do the same thing here, make every single one of these a lowercase b. Now, English, this is what that tokenized name is going to be translated into. So you could do .name.english, .name.german. This is an example. You can also say Polish, you can say Portuguese, Brazilian, whatever you want to do. Fill it in. That's not the best way to do the localization, but if you need to do it hotspot on the fly, that's probably the better way to do it quickly. So I'm going to call this bronze hammer and highlight that and go in here. So we are going to set this up to be, I don't know, a description says cool new bronze hammer, right? I don't need the German stuff because that's specific to that. I don't have a custom table or a crafting station that I want this to be on. So I'm going to say crafting, right? And as soon as I type a seed, you'll notice it gives me suggestions. I want it to be immediately craftable via my inventory or forge or whatever. This is how you would do it, okay? I want this particular one to be craftable by the time you make a forge, okay? And I want that forge to be like a level 1 and delete that. So if you don't need the comments, delete them. It's otherwise it's just clutter. So maximum required station level, right? You can set this to whatever you want. I'm gonna set mine to 1. Required items. Obviously, we want that to be bronze. We want this to be, I don't know, wood because that's the original one, right? And you can set the values here. We'll set this to, I don't know, 30 bronze maybe, and like 10 wood or something small. And then required upgrade items. Obviously, it's a upgrade requirements per item, even if you craft 2 at the same time. That means when you go from level 1 or level 2 of this item, that we want to upgrade this using iron, and we need 20 iron in order to perform that upgrade. Obviously, in order to upgrade it, I want this to take bronze and wood, and I copied that in the wrong spot, but I'm going to put bronze here, and I'm going to make sure that this takes a little bit less just to be a little bit balanced, right? A little bit less because the item's already made, right? You don't want to expend a crap ton of resources for you. So craft them out. What the item manager author actually means by we really want to dual wield these. That means that when you click craft, you're actually going to craft 2 of these, right? We don't want that. So you can omit it completely. Now, that icon thing that I mentioned. So if we click on here, and you'll notice that on the item drop component here, I deleted the actual icon. With the new version of Item Manager, you can actually say bronze hammer, if I can spell, bronze hammer dot snapshot, and it takes the rotation from Unity. The intensity, you can see it's already given me suggestions, the camera rotation, so on and so forth, to be able to determine, where you want that. So I've been told that it uses the top view. So we're in the top view right here. As we can see, it should take the picture just like this by default. It'll get rid of all the particles and whatnot before taking the picture, right? So this should come in fine. Now we need to patch into our code. We need some of the normal default prefabs. Okay, so you can, if you're using the item manager in class form, you can scroll all the way to the bottom and scroll up just a little bit. And you'll notice that this is actually going to be adding your item to the object database. And then this one is registering the prefabs and it's adding it to a list. Okay, this is actually going right here, right? So anything that we've told to be ZNet only is going to concatenate that list with default prefabs and then smack it in there. So the ZNet only is if you're using the code like, let's see, like this. So the axe visual where we say item manager, prefab manager, register the prefab. So this is if it does not count as an item drop, but maybe it's a visual or a sound effect or anything else that needs to be registered that other players need to see but not necessarily build or craft, right? Various things, various different use cases for that. So as you come across them, you'll find it. Now, you can choose to leech off of this patch if you have it in class form. But let's say we didn't. We needed to do our own thing. We need to make sure that we have our item and that it has the correct build pieces, so on and so forth. Now, the easiest way to do this is to right click, go to add, class interface, and I'm just going to call this ZNet patch, or you can say add default prefabs or something. right? So this class technically doesn't even matter. We're not even going to use it. For sake of argument, I have templates. Obviously, I have templates for everything, right? So I'm going to say harm postfix, which means it's going to be a harmony postfix, right? It's just a shortcut that I've labeled for myself. I called it harm pre and harm post and harm both, right? And I've also got one for transpilers as well. So we need to make sure that this is ZNet scene awake. We are going to postfix it because in the item manager code, you'll notice that we are adding to instance m prefabs on ZNet scene. This is required by anything that you want to be visible in the game. It must be registered in the prefabs of ZNet scene. ZNet Scene is a Valheim class. It is a class instance. For sake of argument, I can't show you their code. So if you're interested in that, decompile it, take a look at it for yourself. Or if you're in Writer, you can actually middle mouse click here and it'll take you to the source. If you are in Visual Studio, you can control click here and it'll actually take you to the source. And then you can use that for your own mods and your own benefit. But to protect their code for the internet, I'm not going to show you that. Okay. Just know that if it's an item or a status effect, so on and so forth, it goes into Object DB. If it is anything else, including items, they need to go into ZNet Scene. Okay. So items and stuff get registered in both. Not everything goes into Object DB. Right. Now, we need to make sure that we have our prefab. We're post fixing it, which means after ZNet Scene awakes. But if we look at ZNet Scene here and we look at this, we middle mouse clicked, as I mentioned a second ago, to navigate. We navigated to the declaration. So this you'll see is a prefix because it's not explicitly stated to be a postfix like this. Okay, so prefix on theirs, I'm going to postfix it, which means after the fact. So prefix is before this vanilla method runs. We are postfixing it, which means it's going to be after, right? So our prefab, based on what we've learned from Item Manager, should already be registered because it was added in the prefix. Okay, so now we need to add all of our hammer piece tables. We can do that by grabbing it from ZNet Scene. So we can say instance.m prefabs, prefab cache, git manager, whatever. This is if you're using Jotun. It is suggesting based off of GitHub Copilot, it's suggesting some code that it has seen me either look at before or type out before. As I help a ton of people, this is potentially what Jotun would allow you to do if you're using that library instead of the managers. Okay, so we are going to do mprefabs, or you can say instance.get prefab, and then remember that hammer piece table that I mentioned? We're going to want to get the hammer piece table, or you can get the hammer directly, right? And we know that that prefab is called hammer. And as you can see, that this kind of completed it for me. I'm going to format the file here. We do want to get the item drop component because if we look at the default hammer, I'm going to show you guys how to kind of structure your code so you can figure out what I'm doing here. So we know that the hammer is the prefab name. That's what this is. It has an item drop component, so we can directly call get component on the main object, because if we click away, right, this doesn't have the item drop. So item drop component here, and we need something called build pieces hammer piece table. So you can directly get the component. You could say get component item drop, m item data, m shared build pieces, right? Now we want that list. We just want to know what this is, right? So we're going to store this in a var build pieces. So now this, if you notice, is a type of piece table, right? If we hover that, that is a piece table, which is what I've mentioned. If we click on here and we click on the hammer, we'll notice that this is a piece table. So now we have the list of build pieces. We have every single one of these 170 build pieces that's registered on that hammer. We need it in our hammer for when we go to build stuff. So what you need to do now is instance.get prefab, right? And we know our prefab is called the bronze hammer, right? And we're going to do this exact same thing, actually. We're going to grab the component, get component this, and just like that suggestion gave me, we want to set it equal to the build pieces. So it should, if we bring this into the game right now, should automatically have this set up correctly. We should have the same exact build pieces. We should be able to craft it based on what we said here. And the item manager is actually going to patch this in for us. I use R2modman, so I'm going to use that as an example. I'll show you how to import a local mod. Make sure you're in game mode, not server mode. Select your game. We're going to click create new profile, and I'm just going to call this MoreHammers because it's easy to know. And then we're going to select that profile. When I do testing, I actually have a quick test. It's called as a quick testing. This downloads my very frequently used mods and sets them up kind of how I like with all my shortcuts. Okay, so use this if you wish, and it looks like some of the authors have updated their mods already. So I'm going to say, yeah, sure, right? And we need to import a local mod. So first, we actually need to build this. We need to say that I want this DLL, right? So you can either go up here and click Build Solution, which should be the same thing in Visual Studio. You'll have Build somewhere up at the top. You can say Build Solution, or in my case, I hit Control Shift and B, and you'll notice that it'll build. It builds with one warning because my template uses this here. This is an optional thing that you can set up, and I can show someone some other time. But I can build it again, and you'll notice it'll build without warnings or anything. Now, if you right-click on, this is the CS proj, the top one is the solution. So show in Explorer. We're going to go to bin, and in this case, it's debug. Make sure to switch this before full release to the release mode, which you can find up at the top here. And I'll show you a benefit of that real quick, is if you're doing things that are only in when you're messing around with it. Let's say you wanted to log something, right? So my templates always have a logger here that you can access by calling the main class .logger and then log something, right? So if we do plugin, in this case, MoreHammers plugin .logger, which is right here, log info, right? So you have various things. You can log it as an error. You can log it as info, which will be white text in the console. Log it as a message is also a white text. Log as a warning, so on. So this kind of tells the user things that you want to log. But yellow and red text is obviously easier to see in a sea of white text, right? So let's say I wanted to log this as yellow for me to be able to see it. You can either patch into BepInEx yourself, or you can just log it as a warning. And then because we're in debug mode, you can actually do a pound sign here and then say if, right? And then look at this, type in debug, right? And then we will go here, highlight this, and I'm just going to drag and move this right here. So if you notice, it's white. It shows us that we can log that as debug, but the moment that I switch this to release and I click back, you'll notice that this grays itself out. It grays itself out because we're no longer in debug mode. So if you hit Control Shift B now, in my case, we have a bin and then we have a release folder. This will not print at all because we're not in debug mode if we distribute our release version of it. Okay, so this helps you out if you're in debug mode. So when you're testing stuff, always put it in debug. That way you can see things, right? And I'll show you what this looks like. So I'm going to build this once more. We get that. We go here. We're going to go to bin. I'm going to grab the debug version of my mod, which is MoreHammers, and keep note of where that path is. With R2modman, and I believe with Nexus, you can import local mods. So if you go to settings, all, profile, whatever, import local mod here, you can say select file. I'm going to copy the path in my file explorer to my other one, and I'm going to paste it right here. And then I am going to grab that, say select file. Author obviously is me. We'll say it's version 1. We'll hit import local mod. And you'll notice I don't have an icon or anything, but it is here. Okay. And then we just click start modded. You'll be able to test your mod. You'll see if it loads. And it looks like I hit Control C too many times. So if we look at this, you can actually watch all of the mods in my profile load here, which is why I absolutely love that R2modman makes that simple for me. So I'm going to scroll up. You'll notice that custom creature, I did not fix that shader, and I didn't do it purposefully. Um, you'll notice that it says failed to find the binary shader data custom creature. That is an error that you will get if you do what we did here. On the mesh renderer for our bronze hammer, we left this as custom creature. When you rip the game, it gives you dummy shaders. Okay, so it gives you the name and some of the properties, but it doesn't actually give you the binary data that is related to it, that is pretty much only in the hands of the Valheim devs. So you have to clone that at runtime, which you can go to my GitHub. Okay, if you go to github.com, mine's actually not showing up here, so we'll do github.com. Just jump to my profile. If you go to Azimat Dev Piece Manager, you'll notice I have something called a material replacer. So this is a class that you can actually go to raw, Control A, Control C, and copy and paste into your stuff. But it has a method, and I'll show you how to use that. Why not? Let's not skip that. So we'll jump in here. I will say right click on this, add class. I'm going to call this material, the same thing, material replacer. And I'm going to hit Control A, Control V, and paste. Okay, you'll notice that it has custom piece, vegetation, static rock, all this, and custom creature. And custom creature, even though it's a hammer, is applied to this particular material. So we want that, right? Let's say that we want that. So for our bronze hammer here, you can say material replacer, right? In piece manager, that's what it's going to say. Material replacer dot. Now we want to not necessarily replace the whole material, but we want to replace the shader. So we're going to say shader swap. And it says it takes the game object and it takes a shader type. So the game object that you can get from your item here is actually by calling bronze hammer dot prefab, which gives us the actual game object of what we have. Forge is not valid. Ignore this suggestion. And if we hit comma and then space, it'll actually suggest the right one. So we want to say custom creature. That's how you would register this. That's how you would fix that in code. Okay, super simple. You can also say always use Unity shader. So whatever is in Unity, just use it, whatever it is. If it's not in the predefined list of, grass shader, piece shader, rock shader, so on, right? You can tell it to use Unity shader here. If you have any issues with that, let me know. For sake of argument, I'm not going to use it right now. And I'm going to go in to my game. So I'm going to go inside here. And I'll show you kind of how simple this is. And hopefully I've done my code correctly and whatnot. I always get nervous when I do tutorials, which is why I don't do them crazy often. But I don't see any errors other than that massive warning that we had. And ZNet scene definitely awoke, both prefix and postfix right now. And my Azu quick texting always has debug logs on, which aren't usually visible. So because all my hotkeys are set up, if you use my hotkeys, this is the end button on my keyboard. So we can say bronze hammer, and you'll actually see, hey, look, there's my bronze hammer. I'm going to put it in my inventory, and I'm going to spawn it. It is pink because of that big shader error that we had, right? I'm going to say 2. Look at that. There's my hammer. Yay, cool. And if we right-click while the hammer is in my hand, I have all the correct prefabs, right? Now, if we wanted to craft this, again, my testing profile automatically has no cost turned on. We can scroll through here. We see hammer. And we have bronze hammer all the way at the bottom. You'll notice that it has 30 bronze, 10 wood, which is exactly what we set up in our code here. Bronze 30, wood 10. And if we needed to upgrade this, let's say we go to upgrade, we have bronze hammer. You'll notice that it takes 20 and then it takes 5. Right? And we can upgrade. It works just fine. The item manager has helped us out with that. And boom, now we're at level 4. It's reached matched quality, which is what we set in Unity. If you have the BepInEx configuration manager, the official one on Thunderstore, it should be called the official BepInEx configuration manager. It's by me. I just maintain the upload. I am not the actual creator of this, okay? So Our hammer is already in game. That is from start to finish. You can test out the shaders. You can, if you don't want to use custom creature as a shader, and you have your own, you can load it from your asset bundle. You can also switch it in Unity away from custom creature to standard. So you can go here and say standard. You'll notice that it looks a little bit shiny. The metal doesn't quite look right, and that is because of the smoothness here. So you can tweak that and change it. Standard will not throw that error by default, so just keep that in mind. But their code has specific things that allow metal to look a little bit more metal in game. Okay, so we have all of our build prefabs. We have all of our stuff. We can do everything that we need to do using this hammer. And then if you go back to the default hammer, which is what I'm on, you'll notice that this still works. And we have things that Infinity Hammer patches into the original hammer. And if we switch to my hammer, you'll notice that it's not there, right? Same stuff. It's great. It's a different prefab name. You can spawn it in. And if you have the BepInEx configuration manager, you can go to MoreHammers here, and you can actually say what the durability currently is, durability per level. And if you notice, we set that at 150, and we set that at 150 in Unity, if you remember correctly, right? We can say movement speed, trader value. We can even change the weight. We can set where it's built, so disable inventory, whatnot. So everything that we put in our code is just defaults, right? And it is that simple to add default prefabs. Now, if you wanted to, for build pieces, right, this is a piece table. If you wanted to add your own pieces to a build table, you can say var, or sorry, we'll do it explicitly. So piece table is equal to, in build pieces, right? Let's say we originally want this, but we want to remove some things. So we can say like piece table dot remove, or m can remove pieces, or m pieces, right? So for each game object, then we can call remove, and then we can say remove this particular game object, right? However you want to do it, you can add that in there. So in build pieces related to build pieces. So this is setting a piece table equal to a piece table. You can add your own prefabs. So if you had something crazy, so we can say, maybe this piece table isn't actually the default hammer piece table, but we wanted it to be a new piece table. So we can say new. I use language 9 at least to be able to use this without having to say new piece table like this. So now we can say piece table dot impieces dot add, right? And let's say there was another prefab that we registered as an item, but it isn't a hammer, right? You can still do instance dot get prefab, and then you can say, I don't know, let's add something crazy to it, right? Let's add guard stone, which is a default prefab in the game. And then we're going to say that this piece table here is actually what we're going to register. So instead of build pieces, we're going to say piece table. And I'll show you what that looks like. So we will rebuild this. And again, same thing. Go here. We're going to uninstall this version of it. Go to settings, import local mod, select file, and you'll notice it automatically directs us to exactly where we need to go. This was built at 144. That is the current time for me, so that looks right. We're going to click it. We're going to say, yep, still version 1 because we haven't actually released it yet. Yes, I'm still the author. And then we're going to launch it. So now when we bring this into the game, it's not going to have all those build pieces. So you can pick and choose. You can create a list. I recommend you look at some of the code for various different things, right? And kind of get that functioning for yourself. Okay. We'll go here, go into the game. And I'm just going to check my log. It looks like my log still gave me a custom creature error. So, and that's probably because I had this set to use Unity shader, which makes sense. I didn't tell it to be explicitly custom creature. And let this load. We'll give this a shot here. Now, we're going to do the same thing. Bronze hammer. grab that, put in inventory, sure, spawn it. Go to 2. You'll notice that even though I got some warnings in my log about the shader, it still looks normal. We'll do a TOD 0.5, make it daytime. And you'll notice that this metal actually kind of looks metal. It looks shiny, right? You can kind of see that. It's shiny on top there. Move around with the sunlight, something like that. And that's just a piss poor example. But if we right click on this, you'll notice that there's a problem. We don't have our wood. Now, that means I've done something wrong, right? Instance get prefab in pieces add, and then piece table. So we set it to piece table, right? This theoretically should work, but maybe it doesn't. We don't have enough stuff in here. So we'll say piece table, available pieces. So this will be a list of piece. So M selected piece, selected category, use categories. So this is all of the methods that they have. If you're having an issue like this, make sure that it's something that you've either registered yourself, or if this M pieces is taking game objects, so that theoretically should work. But we notice that if I right click, I'm not getting my build menu, but if I do it here, I get my build menu. So it means it doesn't quite work correctly. I will note that if you are using the item manager with the snapshot, that this will always be pink if you're using the material replacer. That is just because it runs its snapshot code a little bit before the shader actually gets replaced. So we'll keep that in mind. I'm going to quit my game and go here. This is an example. I would honestly have to tweak this and figure out why, even adding a piece object here is not working as a game object, right? Again, this was a tutorial made a little bit on the fly. Obviously, it's a very raw tutorial. I've made some mistakes and went through it. This is just an example on how you can make something fairly simple with a request that we got, right? And the request was, I need a new hammer with better durability, right? And they want that in the vanilla game, but us as modders, we can add that fairly quickly. And kind of get that rolling. So we can go here, we can say M available pieces, and we can even say dot add. It's not going to like us for this. We can say get component piece. And let's see, is that not what it wants? It wants an item. It's a list of pieces. Okay, so we can create a a new list piece, and we'll say list new import list, and we'll say list dot add, and then we'll actually grab this here, paste this here, and then for list, we'll grab list, boom, boom, bada boom, boom, right? And then of course this will say, hey, do you want to do this as an object initializer? Yep, collection initializer in this case. So you could do that if you want. This may or may not work. We'll even build it and test it. So if you are using R2Modman, you don't have to uninstall this each time. You can say, settings, import local mod again. Click the same DLL, select. Just make sure that the variables are all the exact same. So asmat1, pretty easy to mimic. And then we're going to hit start. So that should update the old one. And because I didn't fix the shader code, we'll also still see the binary custom creatures. But if you notice, because this is a debug build, it did log our, MoreHammers loaded message from debug. And you'll see it's pink in my hand, again, because the shader has not been replaced yet. The shader gets replaced in this loading screen right around, I believe we set it for like zone system awake, I think, because that's when most of the shaders are available in game. So we're going to load this just fine, set this up, and we're going to test to see if my little small quick fix even works. Right? And if I right click, it's still not working properly. It still thinks that this is an item and not a hammer. Right? And you can figure that out. You can debug that in code and figure out why that's even happening. I'm for sake of tutorial reasons, I'm done. I showed you how to bring in an item, showed you how to make this particular request, which just asked for a normal piece table. This isn't working the way I thought, and I might have that wrong. That could be that it's wrong. Gardstone. I thought it was underscore. And it is GAURD stone. GAURD stone. Yep. So the logic works, or should work in this case. So there's something I'm missing about how they actually set up the piece tables and register that and kind of get that fixed up. So that would take me diving into vanilla code to figure out how that functions and why something that seemingly should work is not working. Okay, so keep that in mind, guys. I'll see you in the next tutorial. If you would like me to do more where I walk you through creating something that solves somebody's problem and somebody's issues, I will do that. I'll help you out. You can feel free to join my Discord or Odin Plus Discord and come talk to me. But with Mistlands coming in, I figure if I release another tutorial that shows you guys kind of generically how to do something, or even more tutorials in general, it might help you guys out. So anyways, without further ado, guys, see you later.